the public lecture. I invite Honorable Justice Rohinton Fali Nariman to deliver the Bashir Memorial Lecture. He is a former judge of the Supreme Court of India and one of the most distinguished legal minds in the country. Beginning his legal journey in 1979, he rose swiftly to prominence, being designated as a senior advocate in the Supreme Court at a remarkably young age of 37, an achievement so exceptional that the rules had to be amended for his appointment. Over his illustrious career, spanning more than 3 decades, he has argued over 500 reported Supreme Court judgments and handled landmark cases in constitutional law, civil law, arbitration, and intellectual property, including high-profile matters involving eminent personalities and major corporate disputes. He served as the Solicitor General of India and in 2014 was elevated directly from the bar to the bench of the Supreme Court. Beyond his judicial and advocacy roles, he has been a mentor to young lawyers, setting up the Supreme Court Lawyers Welfare Trust to nurture emerging talent. It's a privilege to have with us a jurist whose scholarship, courtroom brilliance, and contributions to Indian law have left an enduring legacy. I invite Honorable Justice Rohinton Nariman to deliver the memorial lecture on the topic, Fraternity in a Secular State, the Protection of Cultural Rights and Duties.
Dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, what we are about to discuss is two cardinal values of our Constitution. You've already heard that one of the cardinal values was in the original preamble, but the second was only added by the 42nd Amendment, which in any case made no difference because it was already there in many of the fundamental rights. But let's begin at the beginning. The preamble begins with the words, "We, the people of India." We, the people of India, does not mean we, the majority of the people of India, or we, the adult male population of India. It is we, the people. We are therefore all the people of India. That is something that must never be forgotten. So it is all the people of India who give themselves this constitution. And the important values that are there in the constitution are first outlined in the preamble. So that for the first time we are sovereign, we are no longer governed by another power. We are democratic because we elect our governments. And we are a republic because we have an elected president at the head. Justice has to inform every part of life. And then after that, you have the famous French Revolution cry, liberté, égalité, and fraternité. Now, liberty is of thought, expression, and then what we are concerned directly with is faith, worship, and belief. Because that is one of the important prongs of secularism, as we know it in this country. So it is already there. It's a misnomer to say that secularism was introduced only by the 42nd Amendment. Some part of it was always already there. Then you have equality of status and opportunity. And the subject matter of today's talk, which is the single pivot on which everything else works, which is fraternity. Now, what does fraternity do according to the preamble? There are two very, very important things that it does. It assures first the dignity of every individual citizen. It is very important because it reflects the opening lines of the preamble. We, all the people of India. So the dignity of every citizen first. And second, it is crucial for the unity and integrity of the nation. Now, secularism, according to me, is an absolute must as a stepping stone towards achieving fraternity. You cannot have fraternity in a theocratic state. So therefore, what is secularism is going to be the first part of my lecture. Now, secularism is fleshed out, as I told you, in chapter 3 of the Fundamental Rights chapter. And you have three basic strands. The first is that the state shall have no religion. And this you find from Article 28 first, because 28 says that there shall be no religious instruction in educational institutions that are maintained wholly from state funds. So the state can't have or can't teach religion, first. Second, an exception to it is contained in 28.2, which is that if the state actually administers an institution which is set up by a trust for a religious purpose, then religion may well be taught. But that's a specific private trust which happens to set up the trust only for the purpose of teaching a particular religion. And then 28.3, which is equally important because it goes to private educational institutions. And the moment a private educational institution is either recognized or aided by the state, then though it may engage in common prayer, it may engage in religious instruction, no student is bound to take part in it compulsorily. So this is the first strand of secularism as we know it in our constitution. Our constitution, by the way, is unique in that it contains each of these three strands. Many other constitutions don't. And they speak of a wall of separation between the church and the state. We have no such wall. So what we have is first, the state having no religion of its own. Second, the state then cannot also discriminate against citizens on grounds of religion. This you find in a sweeping statement made in Article 15.1 to start with. Under Article 16.2, huge public employment is given to all our citizens. There again, the state cannot discriminate on grounds of religion. 3, under Article 29.2, if anybody wants admission to an educational institution which is aided by the state, there again, though it may be private, and of course in a in a situation where the state wholly manages it, it goes without saying that there can be no such discrimination. And finally, under Article 32, every minority institution which has a right to establish and administer the institution of its choice equally cannot be discriminated on the ground that aid is being given to it. So this really exhausts now the second branch of what secularism means in our constitutional scheme. The third is the most important, because the third is the positive right now of the individual. And the positive right of the individual is first against his individual citizens. And this you find in 15.2 and 17. Under Article 15.2, every citizen has a right to access to every shop, restaurant, hotel, or other place of public entertainment, even though it be privately owned. No discrimination can be practiced there on grounds of religion. Second, equally, every citizen is entitled to use wells, bathing ghats, etc., which are all maintained wholly or partially out of state funds or dedicated generally to the use of the public, like roads. Equally, under Article 17, untouchability is pronounced now to be a crime. Parliament has in fact made it a crime. And it reaches out to every single citizen, not to practice it against any other citizen. Then we have the extremely important right that is given now to every single citizen under Article 25. 25 begins with the words, all persons are equally entitled. Equal is very important. Equal has two meanings. One, equality within. Therefore, men and women of a particular denomination. And equally along with every other. Endogamous. So all persons are equally entitled to do what? To freedom of conscience first. And second and most important, and these are pregnant words, each one of them means something. To practice, profess, propagate. Now, every one of us practices religion at home. Every one of us practices religion in a mosque, a church, a temple, etc. But we are given another right. We're given the right also to have emblems of our religion all over ourselves, which is the right to profess. And the Constitution expressly says the carrying of a kirpan by a Sikh is part of that right. So we are able, therefore, to say that turbans, tikas, and every other religious object that may be on our person is something that is a fundamental right that we can carry with us. And now we come to the problematic expression, propagate. Now, propagate was not there originally. It was added at the instance of K.M. Munshi because he expressly said, look at our Christian community. It is fundamental to the Christian community to be able to convert, to be able to bring persons over so that they can be saved by belief in Jesus. Propagate was brought, but unfortunately our Supreme Court in 1977, in the Reverend Stanislaus judgment, which is criticized greatly by Sirvai, our former constitutional authority, held that propagate does not mean the right to convert. It only means the right to say something about your faith, which in any case is subsumed in the earlier right and in the right to freedom of speech and expression. So they actually almost cut the word out. The result, of course, is this slew of legislation now that we see all over the country, where even conversion, though it is not by force, intimidation, etc., but merely by means of persuasion is now sought to be interdicted. This is something that the Supreme Court ought to, according to me, revisit at the earliest. Unfortunately, Stanislaus is a 5-judge bench judgment. They'll have to constitute a larger bench to look into this. So we have these 3 rights in every individual. But are they subject to anything? Yes, there are subject to some 5 exceptions which are very carefully thought out. First and foremost, the exceptions are public order, morality, and health. Now, public order obviously is a riot situation. You cannot exercise or freely exercise your religion on the streets and create a riot. Short of that, you may do so. So this is exception 1. The other exception is morality. Now, in morality, we've already exhausted the gamut of so many things. We've had female infanticide, for example. We've had sati. We have had all sorts of, we've had temple prostitution. All these come within morality. So that in the interest, therefore, of morality, the state can put curbs on a religious practice. And finally, health. Now, health is again something that needs to be tested. I find today, every faith seems to get louder in its protestations and is making the Lord deaf. I find today that either a person is screaming in a microphone from a mosque or another is banging temple bells. All this must stop because this creates noise pollution. And if it creates noise pollution, it is covered by health, primarily, straight away. And every state should, at the earliest, according to me, first ban loudspeakers and ban this kind of thing, this bell ringing, etc., which disturbs people early morning and disturbs people's sleep. So it is again something that the state must take into its hand and do it down the board, so that again you can't say that you are favoring X or favoring Y. You stop it completely. You can have loudspeakers in auditoriums like this, where everybody wants to hear somebody and nothing goes out. But you can't have loudspeakers outside, which creates a nuisance. So this is the first exception. The second exception is you cannot exercise your faith so as to impede on the faith of others. Obvious. So it therefore says subject to the other rights contained, the other fundamental rights. Now, the other fundamental rights could be the rights under 15.2. I told you, for example, the use of public wells, bathing ghats, discrimination generally in public places, and the practice of untouchability. So that would probably fall under the second exception. The third exception is any secular activity which is associated with religious faith. For example, a temple may collect huge donations, which it may not be questioned about under its trust, but the state can certainly step in and say, no, these donations need to be used for the betterment of the temple, the betterment of the people who come and pray at the temple, etc. Then fourth, we have another problem area: social welfare and reform. At least one judge in the Supreme Court has taken the view, and now it's up for grabs before 9 judges, that you cannot, under the guise of social welfare and reform the essential part of any religion out of existence. But that has yet to be tested. God alone knows what 9 will hold. We in our wisdom held something in the Sabrimala judgment and was snubbed for it, as you know. So this is exception 4. And then exception 5 is the famous throwing open of Hindu religious institutions to all denominations of Hindus, no matter what caste or whatever they belong. Now, having told you about what secularism essentially means in our constitution, and the fact that the moment there is some infraction, you can, as of right, petition a writ court and get relief. What is the position per fraternity? Unfortunately, till our fundamental duties came in 1976, the position was that the single pivot on which everything turns was hardly enforceable. I mean, it was something that was said in the air. That's all very well to speak of fraternity, but what happens when on the ground, history books, for example, are distorted today? We were just discussing. One of our greatest emperors, along with Ashoka, is Akbar. I was flabbergasted to find in a particular book, and a child read it out to me, to find that Akbar is stated to be a person who is a tyrant and a person who organized mass murders at Chittor, where so many women committed Johar. And that's pretty much all that was said about him. And almost nothing was said about any of the great Mughals. So complete effacement, number 1, followed by a total distortion. Now, what can we do about these things today? You have fundamental duties, as I told you, which now speak of many things. First fundamental duty is to the Constitution, that every citizen must abide by the Constitution, its ideals, its institutions. It must respect the national flag, which I'll come to in a moment, because that should remind us of fraternity. I'm going to tell you how. Second, it should also promote harmony so that there can be a common brotherhood. This is directly fraternity, which transcends religious and other barriers. Most important. Then you come to another fundamental duty, and the fundamental duty is that to one another equally, we must abjure violence and we must protect public property. And one more very basic duty, we must never forget that ours is a rich treasure trove of composite culture. The expression used is composite. Very, very important. Now, unlike the directive principles of state policy, which expressly are not enforceable in courts, Article 36, you cannot enforce a directive principle. A legislature must look at these principles and attempt to enact laws in accord with these principles. Unlike that, there is no Article 36 in Article 51, capital A, where it speaks of fundamental duties. And every duty has a correlative in a right. Because if it is my duty to behave in a particular manner, and I have breached that duty, then there is a right, a concomitant right in somebody to petition a court and come forward. Now, obviously, if you have fundamental duties which are in the nature of mere exhortations, as for example, the fundamental duty to remember the noble values of our freedom struggle, you can't come to court and say this man is breaching the noble freedoms of our great struggle. But what you can do in cases which breach fraternity, and particularly in the history textbooks which are rewritten this way, you can petition a writ court and say, look, this goes directly contra to the principle which speaks of harmony, which speaks of fraternity, which speaks of composite culture, and instead of preserving that composite culture, you are attacking it. Therefore, please reverse it. The court would have no expertise to do so itself. It could perhaps order some panel of experts to look into it and restore what our actual history is. This is only a suggestion made by me. But prevention is always better than cure. And for prevention, I have done my little bit by publishing 40 years of my effort in a book called An Ode to Fraternity. But before I tell you about that book, the first important thing is to remember that the first fundamental duty is to respect the national flag. Now, Lady Bikaiji Kama at Stuttgart in a fair unfurled a particular tricolor. It was not our tricolor. It in fact had green on top. It had 8 white lotuses, which were the 8 provinces of India. Then it had a yellow band in between with the words Vande Mataram written. Because as you know, Vande Mataram is our national song. It didn't make it to national anthem, which is Jana Gana Mana. And below that, you had a red band with a crescent, which spoke of the Muslims, and the sun, which spoke of perhaps the rest of the community. Now we've come a long way from that flag. In 1931, that flag was completely changed. And finally, you had the same 3 colors we have today in the same order, but with something very different in between. You had Gandhiji's spinning wheel in between. The spinning wheel being that we should be self-reliant. The idea was self-reliance. A committee was set up by the Constituent Assembly who looked into this flag and then replaced that wheel with one of our great emperor's emblems, Ashoka's emblem taken from the lion at Sarnath, correct? And this particular emblem denotes the wheel of Dharma. This is very important. Dharma being the moral law in this case. And now we come directly to Ashoka's 12th rock edict. Because that 12th rock edict speaks of how best you can propagate Dharma. And he says that I want all my people to hear this very carefully. I want every one of you to go out and extol the other person's faith, not your own. Because by so doing, you will be giving everybody a good idea of what that faith is and praising it. And by the way, you'll also be praising your own. If you do the opposite, then you will really be denigrating your own faith. And he said, therefore, I want my citizenry to be well informed. Very important. Well informed means first, inform yourself about everybody else's faith. So that there may be concord. Uses another beautiful expression. Concord is exactly fraternity. And this is how best we can serve Dharma. Radhakrishnan, who was our great president, spoke of the saffron part as meaning disinterestedness, the green part as meaning we are a part of an agrarian economy. But the middle part is very important. The white band is supposed to denote peace, harmony among all faiths. So there you have fraternity written large in your flag. So every time you people see the national flag, never forget that fraternity is the first thing that stares you in the face. And remember, the white portion is the portion which speaks of everybody's harmony. And the chakra is as to how you achieve it. You achieve it by serving Dharma, and you serve Dharma by studying everybody else's faith and not denigrating it. So this is a beautiful way of performing our first fundamental duty under Article 51, capital A. And now I come to my book. My book was written, and incidentally, it has a foreword by both the Dalai Lama and by Cardinal Gracious, both of whom are great leaders who believe completely in peace and in the harmony of all religious faiths. The Dalai Lama in his foreword reminds us that the goal of every world religion is happiness. So why do we create so much trouble on the way? All of us ultimately want to lead to happiness. Let everybody lead to happiness in his own way. And Cardinal Gracious tells us that, look, there may be so many bewildering differences between all the religious faiths, but at bottom it's all the same. As you sow, so shall you reap. How you sow may differ from faith to faith. How you reap may differ from faith to faith. But as you sow, so shall you reap. And ultimately, in my introduction, I have in fact defined fanatics as persons who they may belong to any creed, any caste, any faith. Persons who first don't know their own faith. If they knew their own faith, they wouldn't be fanatics. First. And second and most importantly, since they don't know their own, where are they going to know somebody else's? Out of question. So, to get rid of fanaticism, it is very, very important to spread the word and to spread how each religion may have its own permute, combine as to where we go, how we go, etc. But at bottom, it is the same. No religion tells you, please go ahead and be immoral. Every religion is a moral code. And if you live by that moral code, fine. If you don't, you're in trouble. And the trouble is, you may be in trouble, but there may be so many else in trouble along with you. Because you carry so many down with you. If you traverse the violent path, for example. So I have divided the book now into several parts. The first deals with the monotheistic faiths. And I picked up my own, which is perhaps the oldest. You start with it, you carry on to Judaism, Christianity, Islam, then finally Sikhism, Bahaism. Now, the important points of similarity I have pointed out in the book. There's no time to get into them here, except to point out that this earth is really but a moment. Everything is concentrated on the world to come. There will be a heaven, there will be a hell, dependent upon deeds done here, a final cut-off judgment day, and then a resurrection where everybody can peaceably coexist, fraternity in its widest sense. This is the Zoroastrian model followed largely by Christianity and Islam. Judaism, on the other hand, first dealt with the afterlife as something almost irrelevant. Sheol was something like Hades in the Greek philosophy. But then slowly Persian influence crept up, and there were one group of Jews who then started believing in the afterlife. And that's become a central tenet now of their faith, resurrection as well. Sikhs, of course, believe very, very importantly in service to mankind, which is a great tenet. Baha'is believe in nearest to God and being far from God. That you get near to God, you are happy. If you get far from God, etc. And if you can get near to God, you can only do so, again, by traversing the moral path. You have the non-theistic faiths then, which also teach you great lessons. In Jainism, for example, what you have is the 5 vows of a monk which every Jain is supposed to carry out. The first of which is ahimsa. Now, if every one of us was a Jain, and non-violence was a credo of every one of us, come what may, there's no question of self-defense, nothing. The world would be a much better place to live in. So you have ahimsa first. Then you have aparigraha, which is absence of desire. You give up desire. And you'll be much happier. Contentment naturally follows if you give up desire. Then you have astaya, don't steal. Then you have celibacy. And you also have the very important, sorry? Yeah. So you have these 5 things in Jainism. And they, of course, teach you that there is no God. That's neither here nor there. That's their belief. Fine. And they teach you now how to get out of this huge circle of reincarnation. And the following of these 5 ways is perhaps the way in which you go out. And your jeev, which is your spirit, which was always eternal and always happy and free, it came into contact with Pudgal, that is matter, got contaminated, and then you get rid of the contamination, send it back to its original state. So that is Nirvana in Jainism. Buddhism, Nirvana is something very different, complete snuffing out. And because everything is momentary, there's nothing that is, everything subject to change. And the Buddha's great central message was that you must recognize that you are born with suffering first, and the way out, therefore, is to follow the great eightfold path, which according to him was a middle path. No extreme asceticism on the one hand, and no extreme indulgence on the other. And what is the middle path? Again, back to the good old Zoroastrian, good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Of course, it's put different. Right, put differently. Right action, right words, right meditation, right speech, etc. Then you have two very interesting Chinese religions, which as far as I know, are not practiced here. Incidentally, I attended the Chicago Parliament of World Religions, the 130th anniversary of Swami Vivekananda's speech. And we were all made to sign some 25 principles of morality. And there were 25 of us chosen from different faiths. So I represented the Zoroastrian faith. Just above me was a Confucian who signed as a Confucian. So it's very much a practiced faith today. And it's a fabulous faith because, though again it doesn't speak of God and it's concerned with here and now, like Buddhism, it speaks of the superior man. Now, the superior man is who? Again, a man who practices virtue. And the important thing it tells you is how to inculcate family life, family virtues, to worship your ancestors, etc. And equally interesting is Tao, because Tao is just blend with nature. And they give you the example of water. Water is something that is soft, but over centuries it can flatten the hardest rock. So they give you that example and they tell you, blend with nature. And everything that goes wrong is because you don't blend with nature. Now you come to the major problem area, Hinduism. Because Hinduism is so vast and the choice is so great that is baffling. You first study the Vedas. In the Rig Veda, in the 10th mandala, you have so many creation hymns. There's no time to get into them just now. All beautiful speculations of how we all came into being. The last one being 129, where the one that existed and breathed by itself must have created us. Perhaps the gods in heavens know, perhaps they know not, and it ends on that enigmatic note. You have the Upanishads, and in the 13 Upanishads which I have dealt with in my book, you have some very beautiful stories which give you the central message. The oldest of them is the Brihadaranya. And the Brihadaranya Upanishad has that famous 3 lines. From the unreal, lead me to the real. From darkness, lead me to light. From death, lead me to immortality. And it has this constant saying of the word neti. Describe Brahman. Is it this? Neti. Is it that? Neti. Indescribable. You have to experience it. In the Chandogya, you have that famous statement of Tattvamasi, where you have a father and a son, Uddalaka and Shvetaketu. And Shvetaketu is asked by his father, you for 12 years you have been studying. What have you studied? And have you studied anything about Brahman, about the spirit, etc.? So the son tells him, I haven't studied any such thing, father. So he said, please realize that the universe is built on this truth. Everything is built on this building block. It is like salt in water. You can't see it. You have to feel it. And that thou art, Tattvamasi, that is within you, that building block. Then, of course, you have, there's no time just now. So many beautiful things. Then there is the Katha Upanishad, where again in the Katha Upanishad, you have again another father and another son, Vajravas and his son Nakiketa. And they have another spat because the son tells the father, what is this nonsense? You seem to be giving away everything which is not helping anybody that you're giving these things to. So the father says, all right, I'll give you away as well. So he said, give me away. So he said, who do I give you away? Death. Go to Lord Yama. So the son goes to Lord Yama. And he waits 3 days and nights before Lord Yama appears. So Lord Yama tells him, I've got to give you 3 boons. You have kept you waiting so long. So the first boon was, restore me to my father. Easily done, all right. Second boon was, teach me about a fire sacrifice. Equally easily done. Third question was deadly. What happens to a man after he dies? To that, Yama said, I can't tell you. So he said, no, you said you have to give me 3 boons. So you have to tell me. And finally, the answer Yama gives is something unbelievable. He says, in life, many people do what is good. Many people do what is pleasant. Doing of good alone will reach you here. Doing of what is pleasant will never reach you here. So it's a very interesting comparison now, not between good and evil, but good and pleasant. Another brilliant thought, and there are so many like this. Now, post Upanishads, what do you come to? You come to the 6 famous schools, 2 of which are atheistic, and you learn so much from them. Most of them believe in Gyan Yoga. But before we come to the schools, we come to the Bhagavad Gita, which is the most important of them all. Because in the Bhagavad Gita, you're told that you are bound by the coils of action. You cannot escape action. Therefore, do action correctly and renounce the fruits that you get, if you can do so. Then it tells you there are 3 ways to God. You have the Gyan Yoga, you have the Bhakti Yoga, and you have the Karma Yoga. It says Gyan is so difficult in chapter 7 that of 1,000 persons who seek perfection, only one does. And of that group of perfectionists, those who seek God, only one gets from Gyan. Don't try it. Too difficult. Second, Bhakti Yoga, equally difficult. Third, Karma Yoga, that is available to every one of us. Do your duty correctly and without expectation of reward, you will reach the same place. And then it also tells you about the 3 guns, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. So that you remember that every time you do something, do it with a good motive, do it with a sattvic motive. Don't do it with a rajasic motive, which is the idea to grab. And above all, don't do it with a tamasic motive, which is out of ignorance or delusion. So again, there's no time to speak about this, but you learn all these things from the Gita. And then when you come to the 6 philosophical schools, most important of all is Vedanta. And Shankaracharya advocates what the Bhagavad Gita says you'll never reach, Gyan Yoga. And that is Advait, pure Advait. Vishishta Advait, Ramanuja tells you no, you can get to the same but by Bhakti Yoga. Again, very, very difficult. Madhvacharya does the same thing, again Bhakti Yoga. So these are all brilliant paths of going to the Almighty. You can learn a lot in all this. And then ultimately, of course, it's how people live today, by the stories in the Purans, by the stories in the epics, etc. So, finally, coming to the bottom line. What best can you learn from each religious faith in one line? From Zoroastrianism, you can learn the great triad of good thoughts, good words, good deeds, which leads you to God. From Judaism, you can learn adherence to the law, because if you break the law, you break the covenant with God, nothing less. From Christianity, you can learn love your neighbor as yourself and love God with all your heart and all your soul. From Islam, you can learn that everything that is done for you is for the good. So-called suffering is also so that you ultimately veer towards God and go to God. From the Sikhs, you can learn the great concept of langar. Everybody, however big he is, ultimately can come down and feed another person, and that person can belong to any denomination. From the Baha'is, you can learn this great thing about nearness to God, conceptually, and being far from God. Yearn to be near to God. That yearning has to be there. Like you yearn for something, your next meal or whatever. That same yearning has to be there. If you have that yearning, you will reach God. And then from the great atheistic faiths, I've already told you, ahimsa is the greatest principle, which if everybody followed, there'd be no violence from the Jains. From the Buddhists, follow the fact that you are in suffering and that you get out of that suffering by following again the moral precepts laid down by the Buddha. From Confucianism, you follow family virtues and virtue itself. And from the Tao, you follow resignation to your fate. Go by nature. Hinduism, I've already told you, at bottom, everything is karma. And karma, of course, acts in different ways. It acts in reincarnation, it acts in heaven and hell as well. So that you exhaust whatever you have and then go back to being reincarnated. Now, therefore, we come to the end of this lecture. What would I exhort all of you to do now as citizens of India? Governments may come, governments may go. Constitutional values endure. That you have to remember first. And second, that every time you see your national flag, never forget to remind yourself of the cardinal virtue of treating every other citizen as your brother. That is at the center of the flag, that is the basis of the flag. And that is the basis of the Constitution. Because in the ultimate analysis, the stakes are very high. The stake is nothing less than the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of this great country. Thank you.